Let's talk about paroling the Manson family murderers. This isn't an easy or comfortable topic. 9 people were savagely murdered in a summer killing spree designed to create mayhem and maybe even war. 8 people were convicted of those murders and sentenced to death or to life, although ultimately all of them saw their sentences changed to life behind bars with the possibility of parole. 2 of the killers have been released. 2 of the killers died behind bars, including Charles Manson. 4 of the killers are still serving their life sentences, well over 5 decades after their convictions. 3 of those killers have been approved for parole, yet still sit behind bars. Now, this is not an easy topic to discuss. This case not only carries such huge cultural impact, but it also evokes powerful emotions, ethics, and outrage. In 1972, just after the convicted killers were sentenced to death by electrocution, the California Supreme Court overturned the death penalty, citing it as unconstitutional. That automatically converted each of the death sentences to life in prison. One of the convicted killers was originally sentenced, however, to life because the judge deemed him too immature and too impressionable to face the death penalty. Another killer had her original sentence overturned on legal grounds, was retried and found guilty, and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Since then, every convicted killer from the Manson family has applied for parole, and each has faced a system where the rules are clear, but the politics are murky. And that's the conversation I want to have today. Not should they be forgiven, not were their crimes horrific, because the answer to that is obvious. Instead, I want to ask, what is parole for? And what happens when we stop applying the law and start acting on emotion? Let's start with Bobby Beausoleil. He was convicted in 1970 for the July '69 murder of musician Gary Hinman. Now, Bobby's case is often dismissed as a footnote, especially compared to the Tate LaBianca murders. But Gary Hinman's death was the first in the chain of crimes that would brand the Manson family as a cult of killers. Initially, Bobby really did himself a terrible disservice by bragging that we better never let him out. He also aligned himself with the racist Aryan Brotherhood organization during his first years in prison. But the years have softened him. He married, was able to foster relationships between himself and his family, and created art and music during his decades in prison. Beausoleil has expressed deep remorse for killing his friend. He has, by most accounts, been a model prisoner. He has been recommended for parole more than once. And each time, the governor, whether Republican or Democrat, has overruled the board. Now you tell me, is that justice? If a parole board is tasked with examining behavior, rehabilitation, and likelihood to reoffend, and they say an inmate is deserving of their freedom, why does the governor get to say no? Especially when that veto likely has more to do with polling numbers than the particulars of Beausoleil or anyone's life. Next, Patricia Krenwinkel. She was involved in the August 1969 murders of 7 people, including the pregnant actress Sharon Tate. It's hard to read the details of those nights without recoiling. She chased a woman across a lawn, stabbing repeatedly, and joined again the following night, helping to kill more people. But it's also hard to ignore that Krenwinkel has now served longer than almost any woman in California prison history, and longer today than any other current female inmate in the nation. She has expressed profound remorse. She has served as a mentor for other inmates. She's participated in rehabilitation programs and even led some of them. She helped women newly incarcerated detox from drugs. She trained service dogs for the blind and disabled and female inmates as firefighters. In 2022, a parole board voted to recommend her release. The governor overruled it. He cited the heinous nature of her crimes. But the heinousness of a crime is already factored into sentencing. Parole isn't about pretending the crime didn't happen. It is not relitigating the crime or the sentence. It's about deciding whether a person, decades later, still belongs in prison. So I'll ask you again, do you believe in redemption? And if you do, how do you square that with a system that won't let someone like Patricia Krenwinkel go free, even when the law says she qualifies? By the way, she's just been recommended again, and Governor Newsom has 150 days to make his decision. Then there's Charles Tex Watson. Watson was the primary killer on both nights in August 1969. Watson stabbed, shot, and brutalized all of the victims during the two-night so-called helter-skelter spree. His stab wounds were the fatal of every one of the 5 victims at the home of Sharon Tate, and again both victims the next night at the home of the LaBiancas. If any member of the family is to be seen as the embodiment of what made those crimes so horrifying, it's Watson. But he too has changed. He's become a born-again Christian. He's co-authored books. He leads Bible studies in prison. And by all reports, he lives a peaceful and productive life behind bars. He's been denied parole consistently. And perhaps this is the one case where most people agree with that decision. Personally, until he admits his role in another murder, that of ranch hand Donald Jerome Shea, a few weeks after the Tate and LaBianca killings, I don't believe he deserves freedom. But I still want you to ask yourself, if parole is a legal process, not an emotional one, or even an ethical one, does even Tex Watson deserve to have that process honored in a fair and unbiased way? And if the answer is no, if we decide that some crimes are simply unforgivable, then what exactly is the point of parole? Finally, Bruce Davis. He wasn't involved in the Tate or LaBianca murders, but was convicted in connection to the deaths of Gary Hinman and Donald Shea. He was an accomplice to the Hinman murder, a participant in Shea's. Davis has long been viewed as the intellectual of the family, and by many counts, he fell in with Manson more for philosophical reasons than bloodlust. He has been recommended for parole multiple times, I believe as many as 6 or 7, and each time a governor has stepped in to say no. Why? Because Davis's name is connected to Charles Manson, not because he failed the criteria, not because he poses a threat. In fact, look at this man. He's not just elderly, he's frail. And the others don't look much younger at this point. Now, let's look at what the criteria for parole actually are. There are 5 key standards that parole boards are legally required to use when making a decision. Number 1, time served. Has the incarcerated person served the minimum required portion of their sentence? California law spells this out clearly. If the answer is yes, they're eligible to apply. Eligibility doesn't guarantee release, but it means the board can begin to evaluate. Number 2, conduct in prison. This is where rehabilitation becomes visible. Has the inmate been violent, disrespectful, or have they been peaceful, helpful, and committed to learning and change? Have they taken part in education programs, group therapy, or religious services? Prison is not a vacation, and those who flourish behind bars often do so despite harsh conditions. Number 3, remorse and accountability. This one matters deeply. Does the individual understand the damage they caused? Have they admitted guilt and expressed genuine sorrow for their actions? They made an effort to atone. And have they really done the work to understand why they committed their offenses? It's not just about saying sorry, it's about showing it over time. Number 4, risk of reoffense. This is a critical standard. The board reviews psychological evaluations, disciplinary records, support networks, and housing plans. The question here is not, do I like this person? It's, is this person still a danger to society? Number 5, reentry plan. Does the individual have a plan for their life outside of prison? Stable housing, employment prospects, community support, access to mental health care or substance abuse counseling if needed. This isn't a soft standard. It's foundational to preventing recidivism. But here's what's not one of the criteria: whether the crime was bad enough to stay locked up forever. Because if that were a standard, no one convicted of a violent crime would ever walk free. That is what sentencing is for. That's why parole is a separate process. It's meant to evaluate the present, not retry the past. So when a governor steps in and vetoes parole based on the nature of the original crime, they're not protecting the process. They're politicizing it. And here's something you might not know. Every time a parole grant is appealed or overturned by the governor's office, it costs you money. Taxpayer dollars are spent on legal filings, reviews, and additional hearings, all to undo the work of a parole board made up of professionals trained in criminology, law, and rehabilitation. Is that really justice? Or is it just politics? You don't have to like these individuals. You don't have to believe they deserve our sympathy. You may not want them as a neighbor. You might firmly feel that they committed an unforgivable sin. But if we want a justice system that actually works, we have to respect the mechanisms it puts in place. We can't pretend we believe in rehabilitation and then turn around and block it when it makes us uncomfortable. Which of these individuals, Bruce Davis, Tex Watson, Pat Krenwinkel, Bobby Beausoleil, do you believe has fulfilled the legal requirements of parole? Do you think politics should be able to override the law? And what does it mean when redemption is no longer possible, even after half a century? These are the issues we talk about here at this channel, and specifically in the Collaborative, our private membership, where my voice is but one of many. The bigger issues of the Manson family and their crimes gets discussed. We cover many other cults and crimes in recent history there as well. The Collaborative is where we stop asking what happened and instead explore what it all means.